Welcome everyone to Saanikkiya YouTube channel. Understanding basic risk terms is essential because it helps risk professionals, cybersecurity experts, and business leaders use standardized terminology. Understanding these terms ensures building a strong foundation and also clear and precise communication. No matter the industry, risks are an inevitable part of business, finance, cybersecurity, and even our daily lives. Understanding risk is not about eliminating uncertainty altogether but about equipping ourselves with the knowledge and tools to manage and mitigate its impact effectively. We will dive into some of the most foundational risk types that shape the way organizations and individuals assess and classify the risks and then respond to uncertainties. In this video session, we explain basic classified risks like control, audit, and detection risk, material risk, inherent risk, residual risk, pure risk, speculative risk, objective risk, subjective risk, diversifiable risk, non-diversifiable risk, operational risk, systemic risk, perception risk, and perceived risk.
Control risk is defined as the risk which tends to surface when the internal controls in place have failed, and the financial statements have missed highlighting the failures of internal controls. The audit risk corresponds to the risk that arises when material misstatements exist on the financial statements, whereas audit opinions present a fair picture. The detection risk corresponds to the risk where the auditor cannot catch material misstatements. Material risk is substantially affecting a company's financial condition, operations, reputation, or ability to deliver services, making it important enough to disclose to stakeholders or regulatory bodies. Material risk corresponds potential impacts, material impacts, on companies. 1. Operations. 2. Reputation. 3. Profitability. 4. Customer experience. Inherent risk, IR, is the level of risk that exists in a process or activity before any actions are taken to reduce its likelihood or impact. It's the natural level of risk that's present in an entity to achieve its objectives. Example. The technology business operates in a dynamic and ever-changing environment. The life cycles of products developed by them always remain short. The IR rises if the technology business does not adapt to a dynamic environment and innovate on new products. Hence, each technology business has its own research and development (R&D) wing, developing new products and curbing IR. Residual risk is the risk that remains after all possible risk mitigation measures have been applied. It is the level of risk that persists despite implementing security controls, safeguards, and countermeasures. Formula. Residual risk equals inherent risk mitigated risk. Where inherent risk is the risk before any controls are applied. Mitigated risk is the amount of risk reduced through security measures. Example. A company implements a firewall and an intrusion detection system, IDS, to reduce the risk of cyber attacks. However, some risk still exists because attackers may find new vulnerabilities. That remaining risk is the residual risk. Pure risk, also known as absolute risk, which can't be controlled and can only have two outcomes. These are either no loss at all or complete loss, static in nature. They are situations that cannot be predicted and are beyond control. Pure risk is most common in situations such as fires, natural disasters, or death. There aren't any opportunities for profit or gain when pure risk is involved. A large number of cases of pure risk are able to be insured against. There are three categories of pure risk: personal pure risk, property pure risk, and liability pure risk. The examples for the pure risk are death, theft, someone's damage, acts of terrorism, earthquakes, tornadoes, fires, floods, hurricanes and lightning, etc. Speculative risk is risk, dynamic risk, that is voluntarily taken on. It can result in either a profit or a loss. Speculative risks are considered controllable risks. Speculative risk is often higher for those without experience or a thorough understanding of the market. There are 4 speculative risk factors: market fluctuations, economic conditions, regulatory changes, and forex market, foreign exchange. The few of the examples for the speculative risk are trading commodities, real estate business, business venture, start new business, venture capital investments, betting on sports, gambling, buy or trade shares, and investing in stocks. Risks themselves aren't objective or subjective. It's how we approach things that makes risks subjective or objective. Objective risk refers to the probability of an event occurring based on concrete data and facts. It is quantifiable, measurable, and independent of personal opinions or biases. An example for the objective risk can say that a car insurance company has analyzed accident data over the past decade. On average, 20% of policyholders file yearly claims due to accidents. This historical data provides an objective risk assessment, whereas a subjective risk is influenced by personal beliefs, perceptions, and experiences. It is more individualized and can vary from person to person. An example for the subjective risk is that a small business owner is considering expanding into a new market. They've done their homework, researching the market thoroughly and objectively evaluating risks like economic conditions, competition, and regulatory changes. But despite all this analysis, they still feel uneasy. It's called subjective risk, where feelings or experiences play a role. Diversifiable risk is the risk that can be eliminated by diversification, while non-diversifiable risks are the risks that cannot be diversified away. Diversifiable risk, also known as unsystematic risk, which refers to firm-specific risks that impact individual stock prices rather than affecting the entire industry or sector in which the firm operates. A good example of a diversifiable risk is that a firm facing a labor strike or regulatory penalty. Even if the industry is growing, this firm will face challenges, and shareholders might see lower stock prices due to these specific risks. Whereas a non-diversifiable risk affects an entire class of assets or liabilities and is independent of overall market conditions. It is also known as systemic risk. A suitable example for a non-diversifiable risk is that a global economic downturn affecting stock markets worldwide is a non-diversifiable risk. Diversification cannot eliminate this risk entirely. For example, COVID-19, where the entire world, irrespective of industries, is affected. Systemic risk is harder to quantify and harder to predict, while systematic risk is more quantifiable and predictable. Operational risk refers to the potential for losses arising from internal failures within a company's day-to-day operations, like errors in processes, system glitches, or employee misconduct, etc. Suitable examples for operational risks are data breaches, faulty product manufacturing, internal fraud, example, employee fraud, system failures, data entry errors, human errors, example, damage to physical assets, and a legal issue arising from improper business practices. Systemic risk is a broader risk that can impact the entire market or financial system, often stemming from external factors like economic downturns, political instability, or widespread market events. Essentially, good examples of systemic risks are global recession, example, economic downturn, major geopolitical events, sudden interest rate hike, natural disasters, major regulatory changes, example, currency crisis, cybersecurity threats, and a widespread market crash impacting multiple industries. Both perception risk and perceived risk are not the same, and there are differences in their nature. Perception risk refers to the broader process of how someone interprets and understands a potential threat or danger, encompassing their cognitive and emotional evaluation. Some examples of perception risk are data breaches, faulty product manufacturing, internal fraud, example, employee fraud, system failures, data entry errors, human errors, example, damage to physical assets, and a legal issue arising from improper business practices. Perceived risk is the specific subjective judgment an individual makes about the likelihood and severity of a particular risk in a given situation, which is a part of their overall risk perception. Few examples of perceived risk are global recession, example, economic downturn, major geopolitical events, sudden interest rate hike, natural disasters, major regulatory changes, example, currency crisis, cybersecurity threats, and a widespread market crash impacting multiple industries.